Just hours ago, Princess Catherine broke down in tears as she revealed a devastating truth about her youngest son, Prince Louis. Once the brightest spark in the royal family, Louis fell silent, withdrawn and broken, his smile vanishing without warning. But what shattered Catherine the most was the painful confession he whispered after days of silence. In a single sentence, he exposed months of hidden heartbreak. What happened behind palace walls left even William speechless. The sudden shift. Prince Louis, just 6 years old, had always been the cheerful spark within Adelaide Cottage. From early mornings filled with laughter to his wide-eyed curiosity about insects in the palace garden, his presence warmed every room. The youngest child of Princess Catherine and Prince William was known for chasing ducks, climbing onto Catherine's lap during briefings, and declaring on a Tuesday breakfast that he'd grow up to become a dinosaur expert. But by late January 2024, something shifted. The sparkle dimmed. His once vibrant giggles were replaced by haunting silence. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A missed meal here, a skipped game there. But then Prince George, aged 10, noticed Louis no longer joined him in the garden. Princess Charlotte, age 8, begged Louis to be the dragon in their usual game, only to see him turn away and stare blankly at the window. Meals returned uneaten. His famous curiosity faded. He stopped asking about flowers or organizing meetings for his stuffed animals. By mid-February, the change was impossible to ignore. William assumed it was tied to Catherine's recent cancer battle. "He's just worried about Mummy," he told staff. Catherine, however, felt it ran deeper. Even with her recovery in March 2024, Louis remained distant, retreating further from joy. Teachers at Lambrook School quietly expressed concern. Louis was speaking less, engaging less. Staff described moments of finding him sitting alone, whispering to himself, or simply staring ahead, as if lost in thoughts far too heavy for a child his age. The laughter that once filled their home had vanished without explanation. The emotional temperature inside the home dropped. Catherine watched the boy who used to burst into her office without knocking, now hide behind doorways. The boy who used to race his father down the halls now barely walked with him. A shadow had replaced their sunshine. And though the family spoke often, the truth of Louis's silence remained a mystery. A sense of dread began to quietly build in the background of royal life, as if everyone sensed something truly terrible was coming, but no one could name it yet. And then, without warning, the quiet sadness erupted into panic. What had begun as emotional distance transformed, overnight, into a physical emergency. On a cold Tuesday morning in April, their worst fears would become horrifyingly real. The day of collapse. It was just after 7 a.m. when Princess Catherine stepped into her youngest son's room. The morning light streamed through the lace curtains of Adelaide Cottage, but the scene before her was anything but peaceful. Louis lay curled tightly under the blankets, trembling violently despite the warmth of the room. His skin radiated heat, his eyes half open but unfocused. Catherine called for William, her voice calm on the surface but shaking underneath. Within seconds, William appeared, his face turning pale as he touched his son's burning forehead. Louis wasn't responding. 6-year-old Louis, who once danced in puddles and ran barefoot through the grass, was barely breathing properly. Catherine wrapped him in a blanket, while William carried him down the stairs, issuing quiet but firm instructions to the security team. Emergency protocols were activated. At 7:14 a.m., palace officers cleared the roads. The family vehicle sped through Windsor, escorted by flashing lights, toward Frimley Park Hospital, where the emergency team had already been alerted. Catherine whispered to Louis the entire way, "Stay with me, darling. Just stay with me." Doctors rushed to stabilize the boy. Machines surrounded his small frame as his heart rate spiked and his temperature soared past 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. William and Catherine stood helplessly outside the trauma bay, bombarded by medical questions they didn't have answers to. How long had he been ill? Was there any recent infection? Were there any prior signs? Neither could speak. Catherine clutched William's hand with frozen fingers as nurses moved frantically. "We are doing everything we can," the head doctor said. But the look in his eyes revealed the weight of uncertainty. Hours passed in unbearable silence. No diagnosis, no progress, no clarity. Catherine's body trembled under the weight of not knowing, her mind returning again and again to those recent quiet moments, each one now flashing red. She thought of his untouched pancakes, his withdrawn stare, and that one night she'd found him crying alone. Now her worst nightmare was playing out in real time. The laughter that once echoed through their cottage now felt like a memory from another lifetime. But even Catherine's calm exterior had its limits. After nearly 12 hours without answers, a simple update from a nurse, "We still don't know yet," became the moment everything inside her broke. Catherine's breakdown. The corridor outside the pediatric ICU felt colder than any royal chamber Catherine had ever stood in. At 7:45 p.m., after nearly 12 hours of waiting with no diagnosis, a young nurse stepped out and shook her head gently. No updates yet. Catherine's knees gave out beneath her. She collapsed to the floor, trembling, her cries echoing down the sterile hallway. "I can't do this again," she sobbed into her hands. "I can't lose another one." William dropped beside her, arms around her shoulders, whispering, "You're not alone. We're still fighting." This was the side of royalty the world never sees. Not the gowns or ceremonies, but a mother broken. Her tears soaked William's shirt as protection officers formed a quiet human barrier around them. They turned away respectfully, but their eyes betrayed their anguish. These were trained professionals, ready for any threat, but none of them had been trained for this. At 8:10 p.m., King Charles arrived and found them both on the floor. Without hesitation, the monarch knelt down, groaning softly from the strain. He placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder and whispered, "You are not alone in this." Charles's voice cracked. He had buried Princess Diana nearly 26 years ago in 1997, and the thought of his grandson slipping away reopened wounds long hidden. He didn't speak as a king, but as a father who once lost everything. Catherine wiped her face and looked up, whispering, "I need to see him. I need to hold him." With slow determination, she rose to her feet, leaning on William for support. "Let's go," he said softly, and together the three of them returned to Louis's room. Inside, Louis remained still. Machines beeped steadily, IV lines snaked across his tiny arm, but his breathing, though weak, was consistent. Catherine took one small hand and kissed the fevered knuckles. "I'm right here, darling," she whispered. "You're not going anywhere." The battle had become personal, no longer just about a fever or mystery illness, but about a family on the edge of collapse, fighting to reclaim one little boy's light from the shadows. Then, on the third day, something shifted. Louis opened his eyes, looked at his parents, and whispered a sentence that shattered what remained of their hearts. Louis speaks. On the third day, at roughly 11:32 a.m., Prince Louis, age 6, finally opened his eyes. The fever had broken overnight, and the machines around him showed steadier numbers, heart rate stabilizing, oxygen levels improving. Catherine sat beside him, her fingers trembling as she brushed his hair back. William moved his chair closer, unable to blink for fear of missing his son's first words. When Louis whispered, "Papa, I'm sorry," the room froze. At 11:34 a.m., those 3 words became the doorway to a truth none of them expected. Catherine squeezed his hand gently. "Darling, you did nothing wrong." But Louis avoided eye contact, his voice breaking as he finally revealed the secret he had been carrying for months. "I thought you were going to replace me." The sentence hit them like a physical blow. William's breath caught. Catherine felt the world tilt beneath her. Louis explained in halting fragments. Adult conversations overheard during Catherine's treatment, whispers from staff, and cruel gossip from outside sources. In his 6-year-old mind, Catherine's illness meant less time for him. Rumors of a new baby convinced him he would no longer be wanted. He spoke of nights spent crying silently, trying not to take up space. He described pretending not to be hungry so no one would waste food on him. He talked about hiding behind doors, listening to footsteps, terrified Catherine wouldn't come into his room anymore. Every special word he used, new baby, replace, forgotten, cut deeper than any medical diagnosis. It wasn't sickness that had consumed him. It was fear. A fear he had carried alone since January 2024, through Catherine's 8-week treatment, through recovery, through school days where he couldn't focus because he believed he was becoming invisible. William stood abruptly, tears burning his eyes, and went to the window. The guilt was a physical force pressing down on him. Catherine leaned closer to Louis. "No baby is coming," she whispered. "You are not replaceable. You are our Louis. Nothing changes that. Not today, not in 10 years, not ever." Louis's face crumpled as he whispered, "Promise?" William rushed back to the bed, pulled his son carefully into his arms despite the wires. "With every part of me," he said, "you will always belong with us." Louis's confession didn't just break their hearts, it rewired them. The guilt that crashed over Catherine and William in that hospital room reshaped everything they believed about themselves as parents. But heartbreak was only the beginning. Reflection came next, and with it, the crushing realization of how badly they had missed the signs. Catherine and William's guilt. That night, at 9:56 p.m., long after Louis had fallen asleep, Catherine and William sat together in the small family lounge near the ICU. Exhaustion had carved shadows under their eyes. For the first time in months, they spoke openly about every signal they had ignored. Catherine replayed the moments. Louis refusing breakfast in February, his tears in the library, the nights he woke screaming. "I thought it was my illness hurting him," she whispered. "I didn't know he thought I was leaving him permanently." The guilt clung to her like a weight. William admitted he had dismissed too much. He had assumed Louis's withdrawal was temporary sadness, part of the family's emotional recovery after Catherine's diagnosis. "But he was telling us in every way he could," William said. "We just didn't listen." He listed each missed sign, the untouched meals on March 2nd, the statement from staff about Louis sitting motionless for 20 minutes, the refusal to play football on March 18th. Each memory now landed like a blow. He put his hands over his face and whispered, "I failed him." By 10:40 p.m., they had decided on drastic changes. Catherine instructed her team to clear her calendar for 3 months, canceling appearances scheduled for May to July 2024. "My children come first now," she said. William followed suit, reprioritizing commitments and adding buffers around every meeting. They contacted 2 child psychologists, scheduling sessions within 48 hours of Louis's discharge. The psychologists explained that children often create catastrophic interpretations of adult conversations. "He believed a new baby meant losing his place," one expert said. "He wasn't misbehaving. He was grieving a family he thought he was losing." Their guilt, though painful, became fuel for transformation. They implemented nightly check-in circles, private family conversations where each child shares something about their day. Catherine restructured mornings so she could personally wake each child. William added solo outings with each child every week, ensuring none of them felt unseen. The vow was unspoken but absolute. Never again would silence go unnoticed. Never again would fear grow in their home without being named. Yet while their guilt reshaped them as parents, the emotional fallout had spread further than they realized. Louis wasn't the only child wounded by his fear. In the bedrooms and hallways of Adelaide Cottage, 2 other young hearts were quietly breaking, confused, abandoned, and desperate for answers. The siblings' pain. For Princess Charlotte, aged 8, the change began in early March 2024. She had prepared an elaborate tea party. Tiny cups, stuffed animals, a carefully chosen dress for Louis's teddy bear. She knocked on his door at 4:12 p.m., hopeful. But Louis didn't come. He didn't even answer. Charlotte sat on the carpet for 17 minutes, waiting. When she finally walked away, she carried his empty teacup with her, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Prince George, at 10 years old, tried a different approach. He challenged Louis to a football match on March 25th, offering to let him score 3 goals. Louis shook his head. George built a massive fort in the playroom. Blankets, chairs, cushions, even fairy lights borrowed from the Christmas box. "It reaches the ceiling, Lou," he announced. Still, Louis only whispered, "I don't feel like it." For an older brother used to Louis's boundless energy, the rejection felt like losing a teammate, a friend, a shadow that had always followed him. By late March, both siblings were openly distressed. Charlotte asked a nanny, "Does Louis not love me anymore?" George, trying to be brave, responded, "He still does. He must," though even he sounded unsure. The palace staff recorded a moment on April 2nd, where the 2 siblings hugged in the hallway, Charlotte crying, George wiping his eyes quickly, trying to be the strong one. They missed the brother who used to roar like dinosaurs at breakfast, chase them through the garden, and laugh so loudly the staff downstairs heard him. When William and Catherine realized the extent of the siblings' pain, they acted immediately. They explained gently that Louis wasn't ignoring them. He was hurting in ways he didn't know how to express. Once Louis began recovering, they arranged sibling-only playtimes. On Louis's second day of recovery, Charlotte sat beside his hospital bed, reading him her favorite story. On the third day, George brought a small football and rolled it gently toward Louis. Louis didn't kick it hard, just a soft tap. But to George, it felt like a miracle. Slowly, the 3 children began rebuilding the bond that had seemed broken. But healing wasn't only happening within the children. Outside Louis's hospital room, a steady presence arrived each day, one who carried decades of royal experience, deep paternal regret, and a grandfather's fierce devotion. His role would quietly become the anchor the family desperately needed. King Charles steps in. On the 5th day of Prince Louis's hospitalization, King Charles III arrived at St. Mary's Hospital just after 8 a.m., accompanied by minimal security. He requested no special reception, only a chair near his grandson's room and a quiet moment with his family. William and Catherine, emotionally depleted, embraced him without words. The presence of the king was more than ceremonial. It was deeply human. For Charles, who had missed so many moments with William and Harry in their early years, this was a rare chance to step in, not as monarch, but as grandfather. Charles visited daily from April 3rd to April 10th, always bringing something personal. One day, a worn Beatrix Potter book William had loved. Another day, a polished river stone from Birk Hall, engraved with Louis's initials. On April 7th, he brought a handwritten note. "Louis, you are never replaceable. You are a king in our eyes, always." These gestures, though small, stitched new threads of belonging in Louis's heart. Catherine later said it was Charles's quiet presence that softened the edges of their pain. In private conversations with Louis, Charles shared stories from his own childhood. The loneliness at Gordonstown, the pressure of expectations, and how he once feared his parents were too busy to notice him. Louis listened intently, connecting with a side of Charles the public rarely sees. "I wasn't always brave," Charles confessed, "but I always mattered, and so do you." That conversation, according to one staff member, was the turning point. From that day, Louis asked to see his grandfather every morning. Charles also supported William and Catherine practically. He cleared their duties for 2 weeks, offered to personally step in for the April 15th royal engagement, and coordinated with royal advisors to ensure no media intrusion reached the hospital. Behind palace walls, he reminded senior aides, "This is not a protocol issue. This is family." With King Charles's steady guidance and emotional ballast, the family found space to begin mending. As Louis's physical strength returned, the emotional healing slowly began. The boy who had once shrunk into silence began reaching out again, with cautious hope and shy smiles. Recovery, though fragile, had begun. Small steps toward healing. By April 11, 2024, the ward nurse noted that Louis had eaten his first full breakfast: 2 toast triangles, 3 strawberries, and a single cookie. It wasn't much, but to William and Catherine, it was everything. That afternoon, Charlotte visited again, and Louis accepted her invitation to a tea party, this time in his hospital room. They sipped pretend tea from real mugs and laughed at her dramatic voices for the stuffed animals. George arrived soon after, and the 3 siblings played cards for 26 minutes straight. The longest Louis had stayed engaged since his illness. Routine became the foundation of healing. Catherine created a morning ritual, reading aloud from a favorite book while sitting at Louis's bedside at 9 a.m. sharp. William continued their tradition of animal story chats every night, inventing tales of jungle elephants and castle foxes. By April 14th, Louis smiled freely again. When asked what he wanted to do once home, he replied, "I want to go to the garden and find clouds with George." Physical therapy was introduced gently. Louis began short walks down the corridor, flanked by his siblings, with nurses cheering from behind the station. On April 17th, he played his first light football pass in the hospital courtyard, George calling it the comeback kick. Charlotte brought a journal and started documenting each new Louis moment. The staff nicknamed her the Little Royal Reporter. Even in their recovery, the siblings found ways to heal each other. Psychological support remained central. Weekly sessions continued via video call with a child psychologist based in Oxford, who helped Lewis express lingering fears through drawings and play. The therapist praised the family's new openness. "You're building resilience through presence," she said during an April 20th session. William and Catherine committed to continuing therapy even after discharge, determined to protect the emotional gains made. As the hospital stay neared its end, a powerful shift occurred, not just in Louis, but in Catherine. She had watched her son disappear into shadows once. She would not allow it again. What began as maternal grief transformed into something stronger, a vow forged in heartbreak and bound by love. "Never again will my son feel forgotten." On April 22nd, as Louis prepared for discharge, Catherine released a statement through Kensington Palace, canceling all official engagements until August 1st, 2024. "My child comes first now," she wrote. The words were simple, but behind them stood a woman remade by pain. She had learned that royal duty, though noble, could never eclipse motherhood. Within 3 days, a full family restructure took place. Morning rituals were non-negotiable. No nannies or aides during bedtime. Every Saturday was now Child's Choice Day. George picked football, Charlotte chose baking, Louis wanted to explore garden bugs. Catherine enrolled in a 6-week online program on child grief and fear processing. Her notebooks were filled with highlighted passages on emotional literacy and trauma in young children. She introduced new habits, emotion cards to help the children express themselves, weekly check-in dinners where feelings could be voiced without judgment, and a family board on the kitchen wall listing 3 daily joys. Louis' first entry: "Mummy kissed my head 3 times today." In palace meetings, Catherine made her position clear. No engagements would ever again be accepted without cross-referencing family availability. She also began informal discussions with other royal mothers, opening the door to mental health support for royal children. Privately, Charles praised her. "You've modernized motherhood in this monarchy." Publicly, she made no statement. Her actions were enough. And then, as if the universe acknowledged the family's transformation, a single moment arrived that reminded them joy was still possible. In the most ordinary of moments, one book, one question, one giggle, everything they had feared lost suddenly returned, wrapped in the sound of a little boy's laughter. Louis laughs again. On April 24th, around 5:45 p.m., the family gathered in the sunroom of Adelaide Cottage. The windows were open, letting in the cool spring breeze. Catherine sat on the couch sorting papers, while William played quietly with Charlotte and George nearby. Louis wandered in with a book tucked under his arm. "Can we read the elephant book Grandpa gave me?" he asked, eyes bright. Catherine looked up, stunned. William froze, then smiled. "Of course," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He pulled Louis onto his lap and opened the worn book, King Charles's gift from Birkhall. As William read the familiar tale, Louis began to giggle at the silly voices. By the 3rd page, he was laughing so hard he nearly rolled off the sofa. Charlotte joined, snuggling next to them. George leaned on William's shoulder. Catherine reached over and took Louis's hand. "You are everything, my darling," she whispered. William kissed the top of his son's head, tears escaping silently. No camera captured the moment. No reporter chronicled it. But for that family, it was a royal milestone no coronation could rival. That night, the halls of Adelaide Cottage echoed with laughter again. Not just Louis's, but all of theirs. The kind of laughter born from survival, stitched together by forgiveness, and held strong by love. The crisis had not vanished, but they had faced it, named it, and conquered its darkest threat: silence. Louis had been lost, but now he was home. From whispered fears to healing embraces, Prince Louis's emotional journey has shaken the royal family to its core. But through it all, Catherine's vow remains unshaken. Never again will her son feel forgotten. His laughter is slowly returning, his spirit rising again, because love, not duty, now leads this family. In the end, it wasn't a royal title, but a mother's tearful promise that began to mend a heart no one realized was breaking.